Alright guys, so we're looking at Isaiah 2 now. I'm trying to do some catching up here. I haven't done these in a little while and I want to get back on track. But looking at Isaiah 2, we had just finished up with Isaiah 1, and one of the things that we saw here is that Israel was basically being religious in the sense that they're following through with kind of religious obligations without actually surrendering their heart to God, and God was telling them that this actually disgusts him and he wants no part of it. If he doesn't have our hearts, he doesn't have us, and that's what his pursuit is. You know, he wants us, he wants our hearts. And one of the things that we see here is that coming into chapter 2, he says, the word that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and he shall be exalted above the hills, and all the nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And we see here that he goes on to talk about plowshares or spears being beaten into plowshares, and spears into pruning hooks, and so on and so forth. One of the things that we see here is that God is basically telling Israel a prophecy. This is what's coming in the future. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of prophecy? If it's not going to happen now, what difference does it make? And the purpose of it is to basically tell us the direction that things are going in. And the intent is so that we see the futility of our efforts, so that we see the futility of seeking those gifts. He goes on in verses 7 and 8 to talk about how their land is full of silver and gold, neither is there any end of their treasures. Their land is also full of horses, neither is there any end of their chariots. Their land is also full of idols, and they worship the work of their own hands. And one of the things that he's talking about here is you guys have all these things. You have all these great riches. You have all these great things. And then you turn around and you start creating idols and stuff like that, and you're getting off track. You're seeking those gifts and not seeking me. And he goes back in verse 10, and he starts talking about enter into the rocks and hide thee in the dust and fear the Lord, and he's basically is talking about the same end days things that are being talked about in the book of Revelation, where he's talking about the mighty men hiding in the clefts of the rocks and things like this. And I'm not saying that there's not a near fulfillment in this, but what God is talking about here is God is talking about something that is future. He's showing Isaiah something that is going to be happening in the last days, and the intent is that that Israel is so focused on the material things right now, the gold, the silver, the riches, the horses, the chariots. They're so focused on these things that they're getting off track. They're getting off track with what it is that they really should be focused on, which is God. And that by being focused on God, God will bless them with some of these riches. God will bless them with these things. Or maybe he won't. But it doesn't matter, because no matter what, they'll still have God. And we can see that basically the futility of our efforts in seeking after gifts, seeking after the things of this world, seeking after the things that are going to give us fulfillment, as we start to look into prophecy, what difference does it make? Because everything is fleeting, everything is dying away. You put all of your time and effort into your business, and then you die. What difference does it make? You put all of your time and effort into even a marriage, and not do so through God's lens, not do so for God's purpose, for God's glory. You do it for your own gratification and your own satisfaction, and marriages end. When we seek to accomplish things of our own will and our own devices, and through worldly counsel and things like this, a lot of times what we're going to find is that we do it for naught, because because it's not going to last. The only things that last, like we saw when we were going through Psalm, the only things that last are those things that are planted by that river of water, that become firmly rooted and grounded in God. Because as the riches go away, as relationships go away, we're still rooted in God. We still have God, and that's where we stay. We stay rooted in that because nothing else matters. And as I stay rooted in that, He gives me godly marriage. He gives me godly friends. He gives me a business that is successful for godly principles and that has a godly ministry orientation. Things like this. When we seek Him, these other things come across or come about as a result of God's will. When we seek those things to the exclusion of God, we find that basically we end up being blown away like the chaff, and that's by no means what any Christian wants. We want to be firmly rooted in what God's doing here. And we see that the purpose of God giving prophecy here is not to scare the people, not to give them something that kind of tickles their intellect, but to tell them that according to chapter 1, you guys are seeking the gift and not the giver, and I don't want anything to do with your religiosity. And then in chapter 2, God is giving them a great mercy and grace and telling them, look, I'm going to show you a little bit into the future, and I'm going to show you where this road leads, because you're going to end up in this place where you're stuck in, it talks about how basically they take their silver and their gold and they're casting it to the bats and things like that, because at some point they're going to realize that all of those things that they sought after, they mean nothing. In the end, they're not going to mean anything to them, and they're going to see that what it is that they really wanted and what it is that they really needed was God, and hopefully they don't find that out too late. Hopefully we don't find that out too late. So anyway, I want to share that with you guys today. That's what I was getting out of Isaiah chapter 2. Alright, God bless.